Hey, what's up everybody? This is Alex and today I'm going to show you guys how I made this cutting board that's inspired by the colors of fall. I'll also show you how I cut the juice groove using a quick jig that will work for any size board. Let's get started. I started out by digging through my stash for scraps that were just too big to throw away but too small to be used for anything else. I found some canary wood, padauk, bubinga, a whole lot of walnut, and a piece of really warped zebra wood. I took everything over to the workbench and began laying them out till I got a pattern that I liked. I took out the bubinga because I felt like there were already enough colors, so I guess I'll make another cutting board later with it. For any of the boards that were really warped, like this piece of zebra wood, I used a jointer to flatten them out. Then I ran all of the boards through the planer to get the glue surfaces flat and smooth to ensure a strong joint during the glue up, which is very important for a high quality cutting board. Next, I ripped the boards down to a uniform width, which was about 1 3/8 wide. This allowed me to double up the piece of padauk to get more red into the board. Since we'll be gluing up the face grain together, these cuts will actually be the thickness of the final cutting board. I did a final layout to get the grain the way I liked and made sure I had enough pieces to get the widest board possible to fit into my planer, which in my case was 12.5 inches. Once I was satisfied with the way everything looked, I began to glue up. Here I'm gluing up the 2 padauk pieces first because I wanted to make sure the grain lined up in a way that it looks like it's one thick piece of padauk instead of 2 thinner ones when everything was done. The glue up is pretty easy and straightforward. Just apply the glue to the planed surfaces, then flip them back up and clamp everything down. In case you're wondering, I'm using Titebond 3 for the glue up, which is a non-toxic, waterproof glue that's perfect for this application. Usually, I don't bother cleaning up the glue squeeze out when the part is still in the clamps. I just wait until it's all dried up, then come back to it with a hand tool to clean the bulk of it up. Then I'll run it through the planer to remove the rest of it, which also helped to flatten the board out if there was any slippage during the glue up. After using the table saw to cut off the excess material, I tilted the blade to 45 degrees and put a bevel all around, which will help with handling the board. Next up, I'm making a quick jig to put a juice groove into the board. The entire jig is made out of one piece of melamine that I had sitting around. After cutting out the base, I cut 4 smaller pieces, which are screwed into the base so that the cutting board will be locked down in place. Finally, I determined where I wanted the groove to be relative to the edge of the cutting board, and then screwed in 4 strips of melamine that will act as the fence used to guide the router. I used a piece of cutoff to help me quickly translate this distance for all 4 fences. If you got a router like mine where two sides are flat and the other two are circular, then be very careful and make sure you always have a round side pushed up against the fence. This will make a smooth transition around corners and will keep the distance from the groove to the edge of the board consistent. After the juice groove has been routed in, it's time to start sanding. I started out with 80 grit, then worked my way through 120, 180, and 220. After sanding to 220 grit, I sprayed water on the board to raise the grain. This is a very important step because if you don't do this, then the first time you or your customer washes the board, the grain will raise up by itself and give the board a very fuzzy texture. Nobody wants the quality of their board questioned after putting in this much work into it, so don't skip this simple step. Once the water has been wiped off, sand the board again by hand with 220 grit until it feels smooth. Then wet the board and sand one more time before moving on to hand sanding with 320 and 400 grit to give that polished look and feel. And with sanding done, it's time for finishing. For this, I use the good old food-safe mineral oil. It's as simple as pour it on, rub it in, and let the wood absorb as much as it can. I followed the instructions and did a total of 3 coats. Afterwards, I added a few layers of beeswax to finish it off. I'm really pleased with the way that this board came out, and my wife Cindy is so pleased that she refuses to use it because she says it's too pretty. So if you think that board is pretty, give me a thumbs up, and if you think it's ugly, hit that thumbs down button 2 times. It has to be 2 times though, or else it doesn't work right. Just trust me on that. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed this little build video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you haven't already, feel free to hit that subscribe button. And for more behind the scenes content, give me a follow on Instagram at Bevelish_creations. Link in the description below. Now get to cooking or gifting, or just let the board sit on the shelf.